Welcome back to the Route Podcast. We discuss finding a path to a more fulfilling life. It's me, your host, Cody, and today I am honored to bring in the guest, Kristen O'Shea. Kristen is an entrepreneur, speaker, and Gallup CliftonStrengths coach. She has single-handedly moved the needle in terms of development and strengths for corporate, nonprofits, government, and faith organizations around Kansas and the Midwest. We talk exactly about that. We talk about strengths, how to find your strengths, how to play to your strengths, and focus on what is right with you as opposed to what is wrong. We get into daily rituals that Kristen has, jazzercise, and explore things like side hustling for floral design. I am so excited to share this fun conversation with Kristen and got a lot out of emotional and self-awareness, and I'm excited to share that with you. I hope it brings you some clarity and some interest in finding out your own strength as well. So enjoy this conversation with Kristen O'Shea. Oh, Kristen, thanks so much for being on the podcast. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
I've been looking forward to reconnecting, and it's been fun following your path these last couple of years as you're really focused in on strengths and how we can really use our strengths and discover our strengths to find a more meaningful and fulfilling life. But for anyone that is not aware of Gallup Strengths or Strengths Quests or has any idea of what we're talking about, do you mind kind of kicking us off and giving us a background on what all of that is and what it entails?
Absolutely. Strengths was created about 20 years ago. But in the 50s, a man named Clifton asked the question, what would happen if we focused on what was right with people rather than fixating on what's wrong with them? And if you think about psychology in general, it's very focused on what's wrong with people, what's the illness, what do you need to fix, what's the weakness. And so this was just a really new concept, and he's known as the grandfather of positive psychology for that reason. And so he went on research, since he was with Gallup, looking for people who were really talented at what they did, no matter what the field was, and said, how can we create a language around what's right with people and what their talents are? And so if we think about talent, we hear it a lot within athletics and performing arts, but not a lot when it comes to human development or just generic people, right? What are they talented at? Well, you're talented at making jokes and introducing people, and another person can be talented at seeing patterns in data, and someone else is really talented at details and punctuality. And anyhow, so he did a lot of research. I think it's like 40 years, over 2 million people, and created this language called CliftonStrengths, or known as Strengths Finder. And it's an assessment that helps you discover what are your top talents. And then the idea is, and he did a lot of research behind, if you're spending more time and investment on your strengths, the outcome is so much stronger than if you spend a ton of time trying to fix those weaknesses. And so it's all about what are our strengths, and then how do we use those to make our lives better.
That's really interesting. So it's kind of like doubling down on your wins, right? In terms of like the business, you're going to get a better ROI for focusing on your strengths as opposed to constantly mitigating and focusing on those weaknesses. That's really cool.
Yeah.
So how did you find this? How does that look like in terms of Kristen, and what does that path look like?
Yeah, so we met, right, our freshman year at K-State, and this summer before going to K-State, I determined I needed to be more go with the flow. I needed to be more laid back. I just felt so serious and so kind of organized and planned out for our age. I felt very different than my peers in high school. And so I just decided my goal was, how can I be more laid back, more go with the flow? So then that fall, when we got to K-State, and granted, I've always been interested in psychology. So we got to K-State, and in our leadership studies course, we got to take our strengths. And I'll never forget, out popped my number one was discipline, which said you're great at creating structure out of chaos. you like to plan ahead and like see what obstacles might be there. And it was just, I was like, yes, this is totally me. But it was like the first time I had seen it in a positive light. And, so there's 34 of these strengths, and it takes a while to get to know them all. But, you scroll down the list and there's a strength of adaptability, which means go with the flow. And obviously that wasn't in my top 5. And I have since then seen my full 34, and adaptability is in the bottom 4. But so, it made me realize like this is not something I should be stifling, and I shouldn't be trying to be someone else's strengths. My strengths are my contribution to the world. And as long as I know how to manage them and maybe turn it up when it needs to be turned up or turn it down, it's my best asset. So why shouldn't I be proud of it and lean into it and grow with it? And then I feel like my whole K-State experience, I had that opportunity to do that.
What was that struggle like? You talk about adaptability. That was really your focus going into college, and being more go with the flow and adaptable, and then finding out that now that that's in your bottom 4. Was it easy for you once you took StrengthsFinder that it was freeing and kind of opened this door of, this is really who I am, I'm not going to worry about being adaptable anymore? Or did you find that through your years at K-State, it was a struggle of kind of letting go of the idea of maybe you wanted to be adaptable, or releasing some of that tension?
Right. I definitely think that it was a journey for sure. I think just realizing that the aspect of me that could be kind of serious and planned wasn't a bad thing helped me to embrace it a bit more. And then the part about the adaptability, I think just realizing that's not me. I still can grow in that area, definitely. But I'll never be awesome at it. It'll never be supernatural for me to do that all the time. And so I would thrive better in structured environments and opportunities where I could create the structure and have more planned out, have a more planned out life than just trying to go with the flow. And I was able to look back and see in situations which were more maybe a lackadaisical environment that, gosh, that wasn't a great fit. And so I think it just I had more grace towards myself in both the development of being more go with the flow sometimes, but also appreciating the way I was wired.
Yeah, that's great. And then fast forward to 2014, you finishing up your time at K-State and thinking about what's next. Did you always know that StrengthsFinder was there, that that's what you eventually wanted to do and become the strengths coach? Or how did StrengthsFinder really find you, and did you recognize that that was your fulfilling path or the right path for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. I was always really interested in psychology, and my always really liked organizational development. So thinking about how do organizations make the most of their people. So through K-State, I remember it was my sophomore year, I was in an interview for orientation and enrollment leader. And you were walkout warm-up, weren't you?
Yeah, I was. Those are good times.
It was. First summer internships at the university. And I was in that interview, and I was being interviewed by a gal who was pretty serious. Like, she didn't crack a smile for hardly anyone. And asking me my strengths. And so I was describing the discipline strength without using the Clifton language, right, of discipline. And she stops the interview and she leans over and she goes, "Oh, do you have the discipline strength? So do I." And she got this big smile. It was awesome. And I talked about how much I love strengths. And later that fall, she said, we've been looking at, K-State has been looking at partnering with Gallup and moving strengths across campus where every student would get an access code. And we need some student champions to be a part of that. Would you like to be a part of that? And I said yes, and got to be a huge part of that at K-State. So I created relationships with some people at Gallup and got to work with the professors there who were involved in it. Got to do some training and coaching while I was there. I saw what it was like to spread it across the campus and make it stick so that it wasn't just students taking the assessment, but actually applying it. And that experience was awesome. So I would say I did get to a point where I was, researching more Gallup's work with workplace and employee engagement, and I wanted to do it really bad. And I actually applied to work at Gallup and did not get in. Was so bummed. So I would say, yeah, I knew I wanted to work with strengths somehow, but the most obvious path, which would have been Gallup, didn't work out.
And what was that time like? What was the pivot from there?
Oh my God, I was so bummed. So bummed. And they even told me, they said, you're a good fit for this company, but maybe not the role. And so I also had studied gerontology, which is study of aging, and that was a passion. And I felt like I was just reaching for anything, any job at that point. I ended up getting a job with Leading Age Kansas in Topeka, Kansas, and they work with nonprofit nursing homes across the state. And, immediately when I got there, I was telling them about strengths, and I led the staff in strengths development. And then I got to do strengths training with the board, and then I got to do it with our insurance board. And that was awesome, and then someone from that company moved to another company and had me go over there and do it. So I continued really this strengths development with teams and organizations. And
is it, sorry to pause to interrupt you here. Is this 2015 or how many years are we talking here in terms of when you originally got the acceptance in the Strengths Finder and were student success? Obviously that was probably 2012. And then now we're talking about being in Topeka and working with companies.
Yeah, good question. So like 2010, learned my strengths. About 2011 is when they decided the state was going to become strengths-based. So got to do that all throughout there. Graduated in 14, moved to Topeka then. So that was like the first job. And I still really wanted to work with strengths, and still was to an extent, maybe not as much as I would have wished at that time.
Okay. And that's when you kind of got the bad news from Gallup and we're doing the reassessment in 2014 and then picking back up. So you helped your first company, and then they moved and you started to help the second company. Sorry to interrupt. You can take off from there. I just wanted to make sure I understood the timeline.
Yeah, you're good. And that was great. And so then from there, I actually moved to the Topeka Chamber and got involved in the community, which is definitely a passion. I think it speaks to my harmony strength of building collaboration across partners. And that was a great job. And once again, I got to do training with the chamber, which then kind of opened up other companies, just learning about what I did. I was just there about 2.5 years. And so I did a little bit with Leadership Greater Topeka and learned how to run a leadership program for the community. So do you want me to keep going from there?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so this was 2017, and and I had kept my relationships with Gallup, and I had started to work on my master's in positive coaching, positive psychology, partly for the hope that I knew that a lot of people that work at Gallup, they want you to have a master's because there's so much research and statistical data behind what they do. Okay, so 2017 came, and to be completely honest, I got really, really bad migraines. And the company I was working at then, the chamber, had a lot of change going on, and my position changed drastically. And I was still working on the master's, and it just became a decision to step away from the job and work on my master's. Well, it wasn't 2 weeks after I stepped away from that role that I was already speaking about strengths at a conference, which I've kind of been doing all along. And it just hit me that, why don't I just start doing this? There's no reason not to, right? I need to work on my health. I'm going to work on my master's. Why not start this up? Like, I could always go back and find another job in this area, but why not start my own business and see what happens? And so at 2 weeks, I was at that conference. I, pitched myself as O'Shea Strengths Coaching, which is my new last name. And I had someone want me to speak at a spring conference. So it just, kind of crazy how that all worked.
Yeah, that's an amazing story. Thank you so much for sharing it, and specifically in the detail, as I think it's important for myself, just because I'm always either 0 or 100, and I imagine listeners as well to recognize that this really was a 7-year journey of finding your strengths in 2011, and what that looks like to moving on to 2018, where you just decided why not, and went for it, and now are coaching and changing lives today. There's one important piece that I found really interesting when you were talking and telling your entirety of the story, and it actually goes back to what you originally said when you were talking about the history of StrengthsFinder.
Uh-huh.
And it was, what if we focused on what is right as opposed to what is wrong? And when you mentioned that your interview in 2011, where your interviewer recognized that you had a disciplined strength, it immediately created this connection. And I find that really interesting because it shifted your interview, it sounds like,
Yeah.
away from an interview to focusing on what your strengths were. And then as you looked at, as you heard your story, it just kept coming back on that connection piece of, um, one person led to another, which led to another company, which led to you deciding to speak, and then another connection, which got you your first gig in the spring. And I find that really interesting that, um, knowing your strengths could be such a source of connection for others.
Mm.
Do you have any other examples of maybe not how they've played out in your life, but even what you've seen from students, or some of the impacts on your speeches, and some of the conferences you've attended?
Yeah, when I think about that source of connection, I think what strengths does is creates a common language about what is right with people. And so, if you think I think how much I've learned about my own strengths, but I've just started to view others in a more positive way. So I've done this with my family, obviously, and my brother has high competition. And competition, by this definition, is someone who really, I mean, they want to win, and they look for opportunities that there's a competitive advantage, and they're really motivated by being able to compare their performance to someone else's. And this gave me a whole new light for my brother. I used to think he could be somewhat judgmental, right? He'd say, "Oh, I beat all these
Mm,
people in PE or whatever it was. I beat so and so." But just realizing, whoa, he's motivated in that arena.
mm,
It helped me view him very differently. I also know my husband, for example, has positivity, which means there's just a lot of energy and enthusiasm towards life. And we talk about with strengths, it is kind of like a volume button. Sometimes it can be turned up too much, sometimes it can be turned down too much. And so positivity turned up too much is like a Pollyanna. And it's so funny. We were looking at the definition of Pollyanna, and my husband didn't know, like, he didn't understand how it could be a bad thing. Was
oh,
such a
that's awesome.
Pollyanna thing, but it's helped us in so many conversations just to understand where the other person's coming from, and really what's the most natural way that he sees the world is through his strengths. So it just puts a positive spin on what could often be seen as a very negative, or we think someone's intentions are bad when it's just their natural way of thinking, feeling, and behaving.
Yeah, and it really helps. It allows that positive shift in psychology to allow yourself to see from their perspective a little bit. You're not able to do that until you know their strengths, and then you can kind of see from their shoes. But obviously, in terms of positive psychology, and I know that you focus on that a lot, you hear a lot of things, especially buzzwords today, such as mindfulness and meditation and journaling, and things like that. Are there any universal practices that are really helpful for all strengths, or when someone takes the test and learns more about their strengths, are there certain things that work for others, or is there any tools or tricks that you actually practice that really help you to recognize your strengths, and continue to double down on those, as opposed to the lingering weaknesses, if you will?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think positive psychology in general also studies what what makes people flourish, what makes them thrive. If someone's living a really good life and they're peaceful and they're, happy with where they're at, what are they doing right? And so you're right, mindfulness and meditation, there's have been proven, scientifically proven, to help your well-being. And so it's really exciting just seeing more and more studies come out around those things. So obviously things like exercise, but even things like practicing gratitude or practicing acts of kindness, having more self-compassion. I'm trying to think of some of the others. They're not coming to mind right now. Meditation is one that I actually worked on in my grad school, because that was an area that I thought I could work on. But no, then I think you look at your strengths and you say, okay, what's a good fit for my strengths? If I have a lot of the executing talents and achiever and I want to get things done, how can I add in maybe an act of kindness then goes on my to-do list, right? Or maybe spending time with people goes on my to-do list if I tend to be more task-driven than people-driven. But I know that those relationships matter. I think if competition's your strength, how can you, to motivate yourself to exercise or do 5 minutes of devotion or meditation, how do you make it a competition between you and your friends? Because that's going to motivate you. And so your strengths can really tell you, to me, they don't necessarily tell you what you should be doing, but they tell you how you're going to do it. And in that way, no matter what your strengths are, you can be a good teacher or doctor or coach. You're just going to do it differently based on your strengths.
I like that, the shifting from why to how. So it doesn't necessarily focus on that task. That's really good. So we know that not everyone, unfortunately, are entrepreneurs and get to pick, where they're at. It's very possible that there are people, probably a lot of people, that are either maybe students right now or working in an office environment where you can't be the boss, let's say.
Right.
What does StrengthsFinder bring to them to find that fulfillment in a workplace, or to find maybe the right path to find fulfillment in a workplace? What do you recommend for someone looking to that, or how the first step should be?
Oh, that's a great question. And I call it job crafting. And there's a lot of new good research around that too. But so if you think about your past experiences and in past events where you've been most successful, you can often think about that environment and think, what about that helped me be successful? Okay, that was an environment where I really trusted my coworkers. It was an environment where I had a lot of freedom to create my own deadlines. So I'm thinking for myself, right? But everyone can think through that. For my husband, it would be whenever I get to meet new people. And so the more that you can craft your job to fit your strengths, the better. And you're right, sometimes there's more freedom to get to do that than others. But I think just like a supervisor or boss should set expectations. Here's what I expect of you. I think as a direct report, you can share the same thing back. I'm going to do my best work if you let me think about this overnight and then get back to you. Or I'm going to do my best work when I am in this setting, or when I can close my door and focus for a little bit. And so just knowing those things about yourself and then communicating it. And if you've got a good supervisor, they should allow you to do more of that. Or, hey, I love networking. Can I represent our company at more chamber events? And then I think, hopefully, again, if it's a good supervisor, they'll see, yeah, you shine when it comes to meeting new people and you're a great representation for the company. I think the other thing that's most important for someone just looking for a job where they can do what they do best every day is finding a good supervisor. So more than the company you're working for, it's really who you report to that can make or break what that job is like.
Yeah, that is so true and makes so much sense. But it sounds like, in terms of really finding and focusing on, what you might be best at, as opposed to starting at the job, which is actually where I did. It sounds like maybe the best option would be starting with your strengths and working backward. As you were describing that, I was thinking about the top two strengths that you shared, so discipline and harmony, and how I'm guessing there's a communication piece that's pretty high up for you as well, and recognizing that how those work so well for you in a coaching environment. You know, you've got the discipline to be an entrepreneur and know that you're the one that's going to be in charge of this and handle it on a day-to-day basis. But that harmony aspect of working with people like me, or that you're coaching through organizations, really allows you to uplift those that you're around,
Right.
and work directly with them.
Mhm.
So it's interesting that for anyone that would be listening to this, is actually, rather than sitting around trying to figure out and brainstorm what positions you could maybe apply for or change within your company, it actually worked better to work backward, if that sounds right. Go to your strengths and then
Right.
almost create strengths based off of value. So these strengths are my top strengths. Thus, they bring me the most value as a person. How can I work backward from there and build out a either system in my current working environment because my position is correct, or find the right position for me?
Right, exactly. Exactly. And it sets you up for, so I'm just thinking my husband recently changed to be a financial advisor with Edward Jones. And it was like, okay, you love to meet new people, great at sales. You like to have, you like to talk about like history with people. So, how can you look for clients that have that common interest? You're competitive. So the commission setup is a good fit, right?
Hmm.
And so just thinking about some of those things, both strengths, but also interests and workplace environment. He knows with the positivity strength that too much negativity can really kind of weigh him down. So, okay, if I'm going to start in this office, are the people there? Is that going to be a good fit? Because we're all very different, and so yeah, that job fit, and then job crafting as much as you can is the best way to go.
Okay, cool. That makes sense. I'll definitely. I'm gonna have to go back and retake these. I'm definitely interested to see what I get. So I'll follow up with you. Maybe it'll be a round two there.
I was gonna say, I
Um,
think we should do a coaching Cody podcast. Or
yeah, yeah, that would be pretty fun. I think that would be a good time, and it'd be interesting to hear, yeah, what that process looks like of, similar to what you do with
right,
your husband,
coaching is
of really
coaching
finding and
kind of a
going
new
through that.
thing. So yeah, I think a lot of times people wonder like, well, what is it really?
Yeah, yeah, and I think it's similar to, just on the topic of mental health, and something that I find important, um, and share with you is my wife is in counseling, and the importance of really taking that time. It's similar in a coaching environment. I can almost imagine that you're an outside party, so you don't necessarily have any of the emotional weight that that I've had through my experience, and so that allows you to really objectively look at my strengths and what I've told you about things that interest me, and not get caught up in the potential fear or the analysis paralysis that's in my mind, and can coach me to what my potential could be.
Mhm.
Have you experienced that in some of your coaching, with clients, of um, helping them overcome, or similar to you, of recognizing that, maybe adaptability isn't what I should beat myself up over, because I should switch that and really recognize that I can live such a happier and more fulfilling life by focusing on the discipline and harmony side of things?
Yeah, I think the strengths are then kind of broken down into categories. And one client didn't have a ton of influencing up high and was really concerned that, what's the value I'm bringing to my company? She's pretty young, and going through her strengths, we helped her look at what are the ways that you are influential, and how can you have maybe a challenging conversation with your supervisor, and in the end ask your supervisor, how am I impactful to the business? And her supervisor said, did you notice the other day in the meeting, you don't say a lot, but when you said something, people really took the time to listen because they knew you would have wisdom. And so just growing her confidence in an area that she didn't think she was very strong in, just by looking at the strengths that she did have. I can think of another client who was just really stressed at work, could never get everything done. And so we looked at a couple of different things with her strengths, and it's like, okay, well, you really like the independence. And right now, that's not a piece of it with your supervisor, but we also know you need a clean workspace. So maybe taking some time to organize the workspace. You're just kind of able to uncover different obstacles or roadblocks. But I always have a client, think about, what do you want the end goal to be? Do you want to increase an area of your well-being? Like, I want to have better social relationships, or, I want to have more confidence at work, or I want to, maybe it's figure out what I should be doing in my career, but there should always be a goal. And then strengths is a little bit of like the strategy roadmap to get there.
Mm. Do you have, one particular or overarching feedback or voice when people take their test for the first time and really understand their strengths or see them on paper after the assessment? Is there ever one piece of common trait that people say in terms of surprisement or reassurance? What's that process usually like?
Yeah, it's fun. I feel like I've often heard, I didn't think I was paying very close attention during my assessment, and I can't believe how closely it pinned me. Um, most of the time, people think it's just like them. Um, some in the coaches circle, people who are strengths coaches, obviously, I think have maybe an even bigger impact. And I'll never forget. She's the former CEO of Red Robin, but she said she it was a woman, right? And so she was older, so she had lived through
Mhm.
just so many challenges in workplaces due to being a woman. And just, if you think about, certainly the history of workplaces has been more negative focused. And she said, when I got my strengths, it was like looking in the mirror and liking what I saw for the first time. So it was just, it was a
Mm.
positive way of looking at what she always knew about herself, but didn't realize it could be a good thing. She'd just been told, maybe you talk too much, or you don't have enough detail orientation, or whatever was the negative of it. um,
Mm.
so that, I'll never forget that story. It's pretty powerful.
Yeah, it seems very much like a weight lifted off your shoulders, just kind of a freeing feeling of, yeah, like you said, seeing yourself for the first time in that story. I've heard this similar, and I don't know how much insight you have on this, but in terms of StrengthsFinder and the Gallup as a whole, compared to the Enneagram, which is another very popular
Hmm.
strengths thing today, would you say these are pretty comparable, or do you know much about Enneagram, or have you ever done any research on that?
I do, and they're all fun for sure. I feel that the Gallup's Clifton Strengths has a lot more science and research to back it up,
Mm,
where the Enneagram, to an extent, you can see a little bit of yourself in like each number, right? So,
yeah.
but I resonate with it some. I think I kind of come out as like a one, right? Do you know
Mhm.
your number?
Yeah, I'm a
Oh,
three.
I could see that. That's awesome.
Yeah,
Um, yeah. So, but I
that's
mean, Gallup's. So you get your top five strengths. You can see your full 34, but there's a 1 in 33 million chance you'll have the same top five in the same order as someone else. And I just think
mm,
that's incredible, right? So often with personality assessments like Myers-Briggs or Enneagram, oh, you're a three, I'm a three, we're the same person, or things like that. But there's so many minute differences. When I look at my strengths and look at the Enneagram, I'm like, okay, well, discipline and responsibility hit number one, but individualization is more like four, right? And so there's just different
mm,
aspects. Also, the a lot of people say, well, I took my strengths and I took it again, and they all stayed the same, or they all changed. And the retest reliability is 75%. So if you took it over and over throughout your life, your top seven or eight or so would stay the same, but maybe changed position. And
and that's within the Strengths Finder.
yeah, with the strengths. And so I think that, I mean, that's pretty powerful. That's a pretty high retest
Mm.
reliability rate for an assessment.
Yeah, definitely. And so for anyone that were to take a test, is it more important? So let's say versus the Enneagram, not to compare them to the two, but just for easier understanding, where you have your one number on the Enneagram and then you have a wing and you kind of fall within the spectrum. If we were to take StrengthsFinder as someone taking that, you actually suggest maybe really track the top 8 or 9 strengths that you have, knowing that those are the ones that could bring that joy and the things to double down on for that, knowing that they might shift, but those really will never go away. Is that correct?
I think so. They say you use your top 10 or so daily. I know for me that's the case. When you first take it, I always say start with your top 5. There's a couple reasons. 5 is memorable, right? You can remember discipline, harmony, individualization, responsibility, deliberative. So it's a starting point, and they are your top. The other reason is it costs more, right, to get your full
Yeah,
34 on Gallup's website. And
right.
the last thing, so I'll ask you this, Cody, if you were to see your full 34 right now, where would your eyes
Mhm.
go?
Oh, I'd probably go to the bottom.
Right, right.
Yeah.
We live in such a deficit
Yeah.
focused society that
Mhm.
we think, oh, what's my weakness or what am I really bad at? That's what I need to, be aware of
Right.
or self conscious of or whatever. So I would just say for anyone out there, maybe wait till you can get some coaching to see the full 34. And also realize that 30 through 34 isn't necessarily a weakness as much as it's something that's not a natural talent to you. So, one example, strategic is in my pretty bottom. And by Gallup's definition, that's someone who thinks about all the possibilities. And it's like, when I'm doing that, it's a lot more executing focus and it comes out in deliberative, which is number 5. And so it's not so much that I can't do that. It's just my brain probably won't get there in that same way. And it's just not going to be as natural. It's probably going to be more draining than using my top strengths.
Right. That makes sense. Have you noticed in terms of some of the organizations that you've worked with that, or even yourself, though it's our tendency to focus on that 30 through 34, the bottom side, do those also make good pairings for who your partner should be, whether it's a business partner or finding people that within your organization to team up with that actually maybe your weaknesses are their strengths and finding that common ground? Or is that actually not typically a recipe for success?
No, I think that's a perfect recipe for success. A lot of times people do freak out a little bit. The biggest one is, I can't believe I have empathy number 34. And they don't want anyone to find out. But no, it's often, and oftentimes it will tell you it's probably the people who drive you the most crazy, but it's also probably the people that you need most on your team because they're going to think so differently than you. And I have found through time that they make the best partners, especially when we have the strengths language, because I can say, okay, I'm done brainstorming, what are we actually going to put on our to-do list, right? And I can kind of help them um, get some reality to it, but then they help me think about possibilities that I wouldn't necessarily take the time to imagine or think through. And so that's a great way to look for good partners.
Mm, yeah, that's really helpful. I think just in terms of leadership standpoint. Yeah, if I'm a manager or if I'm an executive looking to build out my team, this seems like something that I would want to pair everyone with. I'd want to make sure that my C-suite partners are going to cover all bases in terms of top 10 strengths and weaknesses, but then on down, it just seems like something that would help the overall flow of not only bottom line success, but I can imagine probably some of the organizations that you've helped and then talked to later that it probably does huge numbers for the company culture and just understanding each other as coworkers.
Right. Right. I think the understanding of yourself and other people is probably one of the biggest advantages.
Hmm. Cool. Well, switching gears a little bit in terms of what we always like to focus on. There's a few questions that call them rapid fire questions for now that I'd love to ask everyone or most people. And one of them is actually, what would you say are one of your 1 to 2 most recommended books or films in the last 6 months or recent memory? And it
Yeah.
can be strengths related if you want them to be, or they can be outside of.
Yeah, I love this question. One of the most powerful books most recently was called When, When, by Daniel Pink. And it was all about the scientific study of time. And as an entrepreneur, I'm lucky enough to get to change and rearrange my schedule the way that works best. And it talked about naps and the time of day when your brain is the best. And I will never again schedule a surgery for the afternoon because the mess up rate is so much higher than in the morning. And gosh, it was just fascinating to think through time and when your brain's functioning best and what's happening at different parts of the day. And it has helped me in some ways change and rearrange my timing with how I deal with things. It was really just really fascinating.
Did it talk about how different personalities have different times of the day that they do work best? So you having a lot of self-awareness and strengths within what you do, you were able to understand that maybe you work better in the morning. Does it talk about some people that could be better at evening or night,
Yeah.
such as night owls, or is it that's just a myth and everyone's actually best fresh in the morning?
Right. It did a little bit, and it talked about for those people how when your brain might be best and how you might schedule your day differently. But there wasn't as many. It wasn't as heavy in the personality types as much as a little bit more about like um, I forget if it's like chronobiology or the chrono, the just the our body's time frame and how it's, is it 23 hours or 24 hours? And yeah, but it gave me a lot of tips on like naps. People think you're lazy for taking a nap, but what a 20-minute nap can do for your brain is crazy. So,
Really?
like, oh, if people try that for a week, like what would our society look like?
No kidding. I could go for an afternoon siesta every day. I wouldn't hate that by any means.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I'm definitely going to have to research that and throw that up in the show notes. Actually, you might find it's kind of similar. You'd probably find this interesting. A book called Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker. It is all exactly what it sounds like. It's all about sleep. And it kind of blew my mind in the similar way it sounds like to you. Really what our circadian rhythm are about and
Oh, that's the
why we need minimum 8 hours of sleep and really what we're doing to our bodies. As I'm sitting here at 6:30 in the evening drinking a coffee, but clearly it's sunk in. But anyway, it's a great book. I definitely recommend you reading that. So I'll actually throw that one in the show notes as well.
Awesome.
Yeah, Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker. Any hobby or interest you actually feel like people would be surprised to learn about you being a discipline focused and harmony creator?
Right. I actually have another side business doing floral arranging. Um, so I've done
Cool.
some,
I did not know about that.
yeah, right. I I love design and like, gosh, if I could do another degree, another job, it'd be so fun to be an interior designer. But I love design. And I like being outside a lot. I like nature. And so when I was at K State, I had an extra elective and I took a concepts of floral design class and we got to do a lab. And I just really enjoyed it. And so I got an in with a wholesaler here in Topeka. And I've just kind of, I do a wedding here or there, or I've done a couple floral workshops because if you think about it, flowers aren't a hobby where you create them, you spend a lot of money, you create them, and you get to keep them, they'll die. And so if you don't have a reason to do floral arranging like a wedding or something, it's kind of hard to do it. And then the general person, how would they get flowers or know how to do it? So the workshops are really fun. People enjoy that. But yeah, it's a fun creative outlet and I wouldn't want to do it all the time, but just a couple times a year is enough.
Yeah, that's really cool. Have you ever thought about doing a strengths focused floral workshop?
No, other people have suggested that and I'm like, "Ooh, that's a bit of a stretch," but I'm sure
It's a lot.
be a
Just
way.
promote.
Oh, it'd be fun to like each flower is matched up with the strength, right?
Yeah.
Disciplines the iris because of some quality of the iris, right? That would be kind of a fun thing to do.
Telling you, there you go. That would be pretty fun. Maybe that's a good spring opportunity. Get some people going.
Yeah, thanks for the idea.
Yeah, I mean,
just strengths in bloom. You find out more about yourself. And
strengths in bloom.
there you go. And then what about daily rituals? So I know that you've spent a lot of time in really honing in on your self-awareness and growing. Are there any daily rituals or tactics that have really made a positive impact on your life? Could be both professionally as an entrepreneur, but even personally. Really specifics in terms of times of day or branding gear. If you use, an example would be a journal or anything that really convinced you to start, or what was the starting point for the daily ritual making a positive impact?
That's a good question. So this isn't every day, but I would say it's a workout ritual. I do jazzercise. And have you ever done jazzercise, Cody?
I have not done jazzercise, but you could convince me.
Okay. It is so fun. It's like dance aerobics, and it is just such a mindful renewing, and I sleep better, and it's so fun. So that has been something that I've found that I just really love, and it's been a way to keep a consistent workout that, again, I love, and that fits into my schedule.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, a good way to get a workout in. But what is it, all jazz music and jazzercise?
No, it's kind of a cool story. It was actually created by a dancer. She was teaching like a bar class, and she realized all these women really wanted to learn. They wanted a way to be active, but not necessarily, they weren't professional dancers. So she started creating like aerobic routines to current music, and it just grew. And so there's franchises everywhere. So Topeka, a town of 125,000, has 3 different centers. So anyhow, it's to all the current music, and new routines come out all the time, but it picks up a little bit of like jazz or pop, like dancing, but yeah, it's a great workout.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Very cool. Well, thanks so much for sharing that. And thanks so much for being on the show. There's a lot of things that I learned on this, and a lot of things to take away. I know if people want to be connected with Kristen or want to find you online, it sounds like O'Shea Strengths Coaching on both Facebook and O'Shea Strengths on Instagram.
Yep.
They can go to your site, O'SheaStrengthsCoaching.com. Is there anything else that you would direct anyone to if they were looking to learn more about their strengths or get better connected with themselves?
Yeah, on O'SheaStrengthsCoaching.com, you can do /discover your strengths. And I give the option of, taking the strengths assessment or taking the strengths assessment and doing a coaching call to reflect and learn more about how do I actually start applying these strengths. So those are 2 great opportunities. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, so would love for you to, follow and just see what I put out there and engage and provide feedback. I think one thing that entrepreneurs need from people is what's going on in your workplace and your job and home life. What are you thinking about? It just helps me to better resonate and think about what my clients are really needing.
Yeah, that makes total sense. I'll make sure to do the /discover your strengths. I'll put that in the show notes for anybody that's interested in taking the assessment or learning more from Kristen about how they can really harness that. Definitely be following her on LinkedIn. Show notes as well at Kristen O'Shea. And don't schedule a surgery in the afternoon.
Right.
No, but in all seriousness, Kristen's been really cool over these last few years to follow your journey from afar and see all of the help that you've done for others and finding their strengths. I'm looking forward to taking this test actually here shortly after we record, and who knows, maybe it'll be a round 2 so you can do a coaching session and see what everybody's about.
Love it. That'd be great.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much. Any last words?
Use your strengths and focus on what's good in people.
That's a good thing to end on.
Yes.
Well, thanks so much, Kristen.
And we will see everybody next time.
And thanks so much for listening to today's episode. I hope that you enjoyed it. And if you did, I'd be honored if you left us a rating or review on Apple Podcasts or subscribe to whatever audio platform of choice yours is on. And if you did think of anyone, whether it be a coworker or friend during the episode, I'd also love if you shared it with them. Let them join in on this journey that we're on. And then last thing before I let you go, I'm always looking for new people living a fulfilling life or topics to explore on the show. So if you have any suggestions of guests or topics, drop me a DM or shoot me a message on social media. I spend a lot of time responding there, or even email. And I'd love to have you help dictate the future of the show. But all right, I'll let you get back to your day. Peace.